Hey everyone, Reader here with my thoughts of comic books I read this week. I ended up reading a lot more DC than I thought I would. The Future's End that I was going to completely skip, I've kind of got sucked into, probably in part because I'm reading The Future's End weekly and enjoying that, partially because I would just hear good things about some of the books and then run out and buy them at another comic book store. I don't like lenticular covers. Particularly this set, and so if I can get them for the cheaper price without the lenticular cover, I'm very happy. So maybe I'll go over those first and then hit up all these other ones that I've read. The Future's End Weekly was another pretty strong issue. At this point I would like to get back to Frankenstein some more. We did get part of that outer space story, bringing in yet another element where Ray Palmer, who we know to be the Atom, although he hasn't become the Atom yet, I don't think, in the New 52, is recruited by the Storm Lords, these mysterious immortal beings who seem to run Stormwatch. I read most of the New 52 Stormwatch run, so I know who they are. As far as I read, we never found out really who they are in the sense of what their real motives are, and, because they seem almost evil to me. But anyway, I found it kind of fun to have them come back. But again, I might not have known, I don't know if I would have understood this scene. Maybe I would have. Maybe it makes enough sense even if you haven't read it. We got some good interaction with Lois Lane and Superman / Billy Batson / Captain Marvel's Shazam, with Lois making a very interesting decision right at the end, which is going to make a lot of interesting repercussions going forward. We finally have some progress in what is really sort of the central story of Future's End, as I understand it, the Batman Beyond story, where Batman Beyond Terry McGinnis has come back from 50 years in the future to stop Brother Eye, who is going to turn every human on the planet into kind of a cyborg robot slave. So that was cool to see them back, and there were some cool scenes here. They finally break into terrific tech, but there's some stuff here that I didn't fully understand, where it seems like we were shown the other characters, the villains, who Terry McGinnis has recruited, getting caught, I guess, and somehow this character sees a robot, cyborg, evil version of herself. I just didn't. Maybe if I reread the whole series, I would find this a reference to something else. But anyway, this, if you have to have read it from the beginning, I think. But if you have been reading it from the beginning, it just keeps growing in strength. Now, whether it's a good thing in the end for the DC universe is still the big question in my mind. And we got all these Future End tie-ins. I should have got the Batgirl one, and I neglected to pick it up, or I didn't notice it. I hear good things about that. I got the Constantine, which I don't know if it will come into play later. Constantine is a character in the weekly Future's End, but this one doesn't tie into anything that I know about. I thought it was kind of a cool story about his confrontation in the future with the helmet of Dr. Fate with Naboo inside of it, and how he defeats Naboo. And the art, I thought, was very good. So I thought it was a decent supernatural comic, whether, I'm not going to get into whether it fits in with what Constantine and Hellblazer really should be. It probably doesn't. And a bigger issue kind of raised in the video by Roger over in Puerto Rico was that this is a meaningless story. As far as we can tell, it doesn't have any effect on anything else But I enjoyed it. This one ties in directly to some scenes in the weekly where we see, I think in the weekly, we see that Power Girl is now a slave of Brother Eye. And this issue of World's Finest just involves her trying to break into Cadmus Island and rescue her compatriot Huntress. I'm not clear. I wasn't clear that Huntress was already there, so that was a bit of confusion for me. And I also wasn't clear who this, what looks to be a black or African American or African something else, an African or darker skinned person who looks kind of like she's Power Girl too. There were some kind of nifty fight scenes, but it was just like a little footnote to this issue. So I would think it would be pretty disappointing to anyone who's not reading Future's End, and even if you are reading Future's End, it's just like a minor footnote to what's going on. And the same, well, like Constantine, this Batman Future's End seems to be a standalone that doesn't have anything to do with the main Future's End story. It may not even have, from what I hear, have to do with Batman stories in other books in the Future's End event. But it was a very good story. I've talked about it at more length in my Batman video earlier this week. I liked the art. I liked the confrontation between the absent Lex Luthor and Batman. That was very cool. Similar to the Constantine book, it seemed like, well, what's the point of this? It may be just some idea that the writer, in this case Scott Snyder, along with a co-writer, might want to play with at some time in the future, so they're setting it up. So in Constantine, they might have set up a possible new status quo for the helmet of Dr. Fate, and kind of setting up the helmet of Dr. Fate as this evil thing also. And here they might be setting up for more, Elseworlds future Batman cloning stories. It did occur to me, which I don't think I mentioned in my other Batman video, Batman is stealing Lex Luthor's technology for cloning, but we can see in his cloning of Superman anyway that his clones aren't successful. Now maybe they're completely successful in cloning a human but not a Kryptonian. I don't know. But it kind of seems like you could play with the idea that he's stealing a flawed technology that could go wrong for him just as it went wrong for Lex Luthor. Batman Eternal was kind of a so-so issue for me. I thought the previous two issues were a little stronger. I did enjoy the art and I did enjoy some aspects of it. But the big revelation about Catwoman and her apparently real father, and that this is going to make her into a mob boss, fell kind of flat for me. Okay, now on to non-DC stuff, and perhaps, more interesting in general. Probably my most interesting book of the week was God Hates Astronauts. How to describe this? It's crazier than Grant Morrison. I had thought of what it was like, and now I can't. It's kind of like, and this is not from this week, actually. It's a week old. I heard about it on a podcast and decided to pick it up. On the podcast, they said this is what the pros are reading. They think this is like really avant-garde comics that's influencing their work. I didn't see how. But it is very interesting. It is like maybe Jeff Darrow meets Graham. What's his name? Something Graham. Brandon Graham. It's like Jeff Darrow meets Brandon Graham with a large dose of maybe an old underground comic making fun of superheroes. And there's just a lot of random humor in here, utterly absurd situations, bizarre names for characters, a farmer who's in love with a chicken and melds her body with a human, and then fights off this group of superheroes who enforce the rules of NASA. The superheroes themselves are just bizarre and gross. Not so gross. I mean, this was not like a gross-out comic book. And then just sort of bizarre occasional narration from the 3D ghost. I'm actually going to get out some 3D glasses of mine and see if he looks 3D when he put them on. I like the art a lot. I wasn't that thrilled by the coloring, and the cover's by Jeff Darrow, and I thought the color there was a little off, but even more so on the inside. The color, it did not work well with the art. It did not advance the art, in my opinion. It distracted, and it's like the color was like this layer of information that wasn't very useful that I had to get through. It's not the worst coloring in the world, but just somehow seemed very off, and I'm getting used to some very good coloring these days. This was very funny in a totally absurd, naughty, but not horrible way. If this is still in your shops, I say pick it up. It's $3.50, I believe. It's cover to cover. I mean, the last page is the inside back cover. There's no ads. There's nothing but story in here. And it's just an unusual wild ride. My favorite thing is this horse that while the astronaut farmers are trying to make their escape from being surrounded by the superheroes who are going to kill them, this horse grabs a beer out of this superhero's hand, and it says drank, gank, and later the horse says, pardon my cursing, F this shit, and later the horse says, dear Lord help me. The horse is just caught in the middle of this ridiculous battle. Yeah, it's very funny. It's funnier than it should be because of its just seeming randomness. Most of all, I think of the audience for this as Terrence, a comic crack. I think he would love this. Maybe I'm wrong, because of course I don't know his taste perfectly. Ms. Marvel, return of the even better artist, Alphonse or whatever. Really loved the art. The story was very good. There were a few moments where it was kind of action scene stuff that I wasn't quite able to tell everything that was going on, fight-wise, so that I feel like this artist could work on that a little bit. It wasn't too bad. Like there, it was, you had to work to figure out what was going on. I enjoy having Lockjaw in the story. I've always liked Lockjaw since I was a kid. He's visually so cool. He's sort of funny and tough at the same time. But Ms. Marvel's a little bit, feels like it might go down a little bit on my list. I mean, it's one of my top superhero books. But I feel this story with the inventor, the bad guy, the inventor, is going to be way drawn out. And meanwhile, while we're just trying to finish this story, we're going to have so much stuff from other Marvel comics popping in. So we got this Inhuman stuff before we had the Wolverine. It's all done very well, but it maybe lessens the story a little bit for me, or undoes some of the reality. Like, I want more time for Kamala's own story to develop with her own friends and her own world. I want that to be up front, and the Marvel world a little more in the background. And that may be too much to ask in the long run in the realities of the way Marvel comics work and the way DC comics work. I mean, I'd love it if it could be closer to what Wonder Woman has been under Brian Azzarello, 30 issues of a story that it's not really interrupted by the DC universe and its events. But it's still great. MPH, this is issue 3. It's a very fun story. What if some criminals who are in from a certain angle kind of good people or relatable people who do their crimes out of a sense of economic disenfranchisement and lack of other opportunities, and they're at play with the American dream. You know, it's not just that they're greedy, although in a sense they are greedy. And then they get these superpowers, and Mark Millar's playing some interesting things off the superpower, this high-speed superpower. There's certain things that don't fully make sense of it, like, yeah, they can run across the country in 4 minutes, our time, because the world is frozen in front of them, but wouldn't it still feel like they're running across the country for a month, or 2 months, 3 months, on foot? But apparently, there's somehow they can not only freeze time, but run fast while they're within the frozen time. And if you can take that as a given, you can enjoy this book a lot. And Miller has done some twists in it that I didn't quite foresee, particularly a big twist at the end. I think this is just going to be a mini-series, and I would think it would be a very fun read in a trade. You know, not the most profound comic in the world, but a really fun read. I'll save the Grant Morrison, Fraser Irving Annihilator for last. I picked up at random this just because I like the idea of giant robots. It was only $2.99. An indie comic that I'd never heard of before from a publisher called Cosmic Times. Giant Robot Warrior Maintenance Crew. And I read in the back they just got accepted by Diamond Distributors. This is their first, I guess they've been going for a while, but this is their first comic that Diamond is actually carrying. And its plot is exactly what it says on the cover. It's totally about the maintenance crew inside a giant robot that flies around in space and fights bad guys and saves the planet Earth. And the pilots, these people you see up here, are big public celebrities, and no one really even knows the existence of the maintenance crew, who are fighting all the time to keep this giant robot running. They're inside the giant robot while the adventures are happening, fixing things on the fly, never even getting time to sleep, and there's space parasites in the crotch of the robot and stuff. It's a pretty good idea. Like, it would be more efficient not to have a giant robot, but just to have spaceships, but they get so much more money and publicity for the program, and yet the giant robot's constantly on the verge of falling apart, so the maintenance crew is fighting this fight inside the robot just to keep things going. You know, here they are trying to fix things inside the laser sword or whatever it is, the power sword, and just barely get out of the shaft because the pilots have ignored them, telling them not to use the sword while they're cleaning it out. So I think it's a fun comic, and it has one really big flaw, which is it never shows you the giant robot. It never shows you outer space. It says we're in outer space, but there's no visual showing you your outer space. You only see yourself inside the bowels of the giant robot. And the writer and artist might have thought this was clever, you know, to only show it from the point of view of the maintenance crew. But even the maintenance crew must occasionally, I don't know, they know what this giant robot looks like because it's on TV all the time and everything. I just want the visual of the giant robot in outer space. And some other giant robot shots would be really nice too. That's still what interests us. You as you're reading through it, you kind of forget you're in outer space, and you forget that it's just hard to visualize fully without seeing the outside and only seeing the inside of the giant robot. And maybe even the insides of the giant robot, partially because of the very dark coloring that they use, are not, it's not like you have a really clear idea of what the inside of the giant robot is like, just that it's a lot of dark gray metal tunnels. But I think if my comic book store picks it up, continues to pick it up, I'll pick up the next issue and see if I keep having fun with it, partially because of the price. and I want to give them a chance. You know, the combination of a price that's easier for me to swallow and wanting to give a kind of struggling new comic book company a chance, it's enough fun for me to go with. Really can't understand what to make of Terminal Hero, who is a bit like maybe Dr. Solar or something. I mean, he's a doctor who had cancer, was given an experimental cure, which opens up something in his mind that somehow allows him to do, who knows, everything he can do. He can kill people just by thinking about it, by, you know, closing arteries in their brain. So he seems to be able to just control reality, but he is forced to work for this, you know, Secret Service kind of thing, and it's in England, I believe, some kind of Secret Service, to be kind of an assassin for them. And he hates doing it. Why he feels he has to do what they tell him, maybe he doesn't realize yet how powerful he is. It's a compelling story. I like the art by Peter Kowalski, but I don't think he's doing 100% his best work. And I don't think Peter Milligan, the writer, is doing 100% his best work. And it's most noticeable because the transitions from scene to scene just happen suddenly. And as you read, you say, wait a minute, okay, that happened in a different time than this happened. Which happened before what? Just these basic mechanics speak of a bit of a hastiness on the part of Peter Milligan. I think I'll get the third issue. I thought by the second issue I would decide to put it on my pull because I thought I was going to like it more, but now I'm kind of unsure. It also is $2.99. It's one of the few Dynamite books that's $2.99. The part of their Creators Unleashed. Their Creators Unleashed so far are all $2.99 books. So it keeps me going. I'm sort of interested, but it feels like it could be about to belly flop also. Okay. I've never even heard of this publisher, Legendary, before. It's a $3.99 book by Grant Morrison and by Fraser Irving, but it's a very chunky, full of material book. I sort of on and off like the Fraser Irving art. Oh, nude scenes on that page. At times it looks very awkward. At other times it looks a little bit like Richard Corbin, and I like that. Somehow his Fraser Irving's color choices often strike me as kind of ugly. He likes these kinds of oranges and stuff. But maybe that's just me. And also, like, sometimes it feels almost like different body parts were collaged together in Photoshop. It's kind of a weird art style. I kind of have very mixed feelings about Fraser Irving's art style, but it is very different from most art, so that, in that sense, it's pleasing. And the Grant Morrison story, somehow it feels really familiar. You know, the story of the screenwriter who meets his creation. I feel like there was a movie like that, and I feel like I've read other comic books like that. Grant Morrison himself has done comics where he meets the comic book character, and other stories where there's a character that's pretty obviously a Grant Morrison stand-in. He says that this screenwriter who has created the Annihilator, this guy right there, is not at all like him. Although Grant Morrison apparently has spent the last few years in Hollywood and lives in LA now. This guy has one side of his head shaved, and he, you know, has loads of attitude, kind of like a Hunter S. Thompson character in a way. Let's do as many drugs as we can, and I like to, you know, dwell in the most negative space I can get into and stuff as my creative process. And then in an interesting twist, somewhere in the middle of the book, he gets diagnosed with a brain tumor, and so he's going to die, and that makes us wonder if this Annihilator guy is part of his brain tumor. I don't know. It's a fun read. I'm definitely going to stick with it and read the whole series. I think it's supposed to be 9 issues or 6 issues. It doesn't say. But I'm enjoying it. Interesting art and everything. I think it, Grant Morrison might lift it up to some other surprising levels. But right now it seems like Grant Morrison doing Grant Morrison, kind of Grant Morrison light. A non-superhero Grant Morrison light. So that makes it interesting. So, yeah. It was kind of a fun week in comics. The Future's End things seem like a better DC event than other ones that I've dabbled in. I'm definitely ending up reading a lot more of them, which is funny because I keep thinking I'm going to drop out mostly from DC and get even more Image and other Dark Horse and other comics. And yet I'm being sucked in. I keep getting sucked into DC. Yeah, so talk to y'all later. Bye-bye.